Hi there! Thanks for tuning into our education video this week. My name is Maggie.
My name is Amelia.
And we are the twin educators here at Hoxaloft representing our organization with our new sweatshirts. Let us know if you want to order one. So today we are continuing our series all about feathers. Feathers are made of keratin, which is a similar material to the hair and fingernails that humans have. I will be focusing on flight feathers, and flight feathers can be divided into two groups, the remiges and the rectrices. Remiges are the flight feathers of the wing, and the rectrices are the flight feathers of the tail. So let's start by discussing the remiges, or the flight feathers of the wing. There are three different types of flight feathers of the wing. The primary flight feathers, the secondary flight feathers, and the tertiary feathers. And those are all what allow the bird to fly with their wings. And I totally forgot to introduce my bird friends today. This is little Richard, who has all of those feathers, but proportionate to his body, right? This is from Beauty, our turkey vulture, and it's her primary flight feather. And Richard has those as well, but small-sized, right? So let's talk about the primary and secondary flight feathers first. These are the outermost flight feathers of the wings, and they're what allow the bird to fly. And flight feathers, the primary and secondary, have extremely interesting edges from the center shaft of the feather. And they are extremely strong due to a locking mechanism that Amelia is going to tell us a little more about.
So the center of the feather, here I've got the feather backwards, is the shaft or the rachis, and all of the pieces that come off of it are called barbs. So even these little downy pieces here are still barbs. They can be stiff or they can be soft. And coming off of these stiff ones are called barbules, so you can see how I can separate it, but they act like little hooks, like a zipper, so that you can reconnect the pieces like that.
Very cool. So the flight feathers, especially the primary and secondary, have extremely strong outer edges, and that's what allows them to withstand the pressures of flight, but also be flexible enough to have precision for flight. And the primary and secondary feathers are actually anchored to bone rather than muscle like other feathers. This allows for them to be much stronger and to let the bird fly better. And the last most inner part of the wing feathers, or the rectrices, the remiges, is the tertiary feathers. These are kind of in the armpit of the bird, I would say. And they cover up the primary and secondary feathers when the bird has its wings tucked into its body, like Turbo and Richard have their wings right now. So they're very important as well because they protect those primary and secondary feathers too. Now on to the wing, or the tail feathers, the rectrices, the tail feathers. The rectrices also help in flight, and they usually have 12 rectrices on their tail. But only the middle two have been anchored to bone. The other ones are smaller, and they're kind of more asymmetrical, going away from the middle two flight feathers on the tail. And the tail feathers allow for extreme steering and precision in flight. And it's very interesting though, some birds have adapted to have very showy tails, and they don't aid in flight at all, which is very interesting. And then lastly, I will be discussing the contour feathers because they also aid in flight. The contour feathers are what you see on the outside of the bird, giving them that streamline look. Contour feathers can be extremely bright or more dully colored, and we'll get into that more tomorrow or next week when we do a video. And this either helps the bird show off or to be more camouflaged. Contour feathers on the wing shape the wing into a more efficient airfoil by smoothing over the region where the flight feathers are. So we're going to move on to Amelia, who's going to explain more of the different body feathers.
So let's look in on Turbo, who you may remember as being our burrowing owl. She was the one who got caught in a roof turbine, and it caused some serious damage to one of her wings that never healed properly, and that's how she ended up joining our education team here at Hawks Aloft. So we talked about flight feathers, but what about the rest of the feathers on a bird, or feathers on birds that don't fly? It turns out there are two basic types of feathers. There are plumulaceous feathers and there are pennaceous feathers. So pennaceous feathers are the stiff, like the flight feathers. They're stiff and they're flat, and they tend to look like this. They can be the contour feathers or the wing feathers, things like that. And then the plumulaceous feathers are the soft, downy ones like this one. And you can actually have a feather that has both pennaceous and plumulaceous. Like this one has the pennaceous at the top and the plumulaceous at the bottom. Now, underneath the contour feathers are feathers called semi-plumes, and these help aid in insulation. And their barbs that come off of it don't have any barbules, so they don't connect in any way. Beneath the semi-plume, these are kind of hard to show, but they're just little downy feathers. They're little tiny feathers that aid in extra warmth, and I pulled these off of a cage today because it's starting to warm up, and a lot of our birds are going to molt their downy feathers for the warm weather. There's also a type of feather called a phyloplume, which is a really simple rachis with just a few barbs coming off of it. And then the last feather type is called powder down, and I don't have an example of that because it's something found mostly in waterfowl and parrots. So they're continuously growing feathers that the parrots can bite into and release a powder, and then they can spread that powder all over their feathers to aid in preening. So it's a pretty interesting feather. Now, a lot of feathers have developed some rather extreme adaptations. For example, this is a king bird of paradise, and if you look at his tail, it's mostly one long bare rachis with just a swirl of barbs at the end, and I have a really cool close-up of that swirl of barbs at the end. And they have adapted this to use to attract a mate. So that's one use of an extreme adaptation. And finally, owls like Turbo's here have very soft feathers that have kind of a comb-like structure on the edge of it, so that when they flap their wings, the air can pass through it silently and they can sneak up on their prey when it's dark out. So those are just some of the really cool adaptations of the different types of feathers. So we hope that you have enjoyed learning about the different types of feathers and how they aid in flight. Next week, we're going to continue our feather discussion with feather coloration, which is really fascinating. We want to thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Let us know if you have any questions or suggestions, and we will see you next time.